You're listening to the Jam Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is three-time Oscar-winning filmmaker, an Emmy-nominated filmmaker, and award-winning author, Mark Jonathan Harris. And we're going to be talking about his new book, which is a series of short stories, which I absolutely loved each one of these. They were just, I love the way you write, Mark. You just bring us right in, and yet you visually see everything that you have written. So I'm looking forward to talking about Misfits.
Well, thank you. I think I write my training as a filmmaker helps me to, as a writer, to see clearly and to concisely try to describe my characters.
Well, you did a wonderful job with it. I well, there's so many things. I really want to dive into your film career a little bit, and then we'll dive into the book because, three times you won the Oscar. That's pretty amazing right there.
It is, but the first time I won an Oscar, I was not actually there. I was in South America making another film. And I only realized that I won an Oscar by reading it in the newspaper in El Tiempo. I was in Colombia at the time. And it was very funny because we were trying to get our equipment out of the airport. And we're having difficulty. And the person I was with, the translator, went up and said, look, and showed the newspaper. He just won an Academy Award. And so all the customs officials got together and they came back a moment later. They said, for the very distinguished American, we're happy to let your equipment through for a slight bribe.
That's a great
So they knew
story.
immediately what the Academy Award was worth.
That's a wonderful story. Oh my God. Well, so many of your films, and this is, I've always, well, I've had a many shows on about the Holocaust and World War II because I've always been fascinated by that war and everything that took place. And a number of your films, deal with that. And one, let me just get to the page and you know which one it is. The Into the Arms of Strangers, the stories of the Kinder transport that is in the U.S. Library of Congress for permanent preservation in the film National Film Registry. I had to read all of that.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
That
This
is a
type of
real honor. Yes, it's great to know that at least one of the films that I've done will have a long life, and I think part of that is because of the subject matter, as well as the film itself. But it memorializes an important part of history.
It really does. I don't know if you saw the film One Life with Anthony Hopkins about Nicholas Winton.
Yes, and Nicholas Winton is actually in our film, Into the Arms of Strangers. There's an interview with him. Yes, he was a remarkable man.
Yes, he was. He really was. And I love that a lot of these stories that we never knew about are coming out now. There seems to be more stories.
It's amazing how many stories there are. I mean, many of the people who lived through that period and many of the survivors of concentration camps are, of course, dead now.
Right.
Um, in fact, almost everyone that we interviewed for the Kinder Transport film, has died. Uh, so we were very lucky. We did this about 24 years ago to be able to get the testimony of these people while they were still alive. But many of them had never talked about their experience before or talked about it very little. So it was an opportunity for them to finally come to terms with something which had been such a traumatic part of their lives. And I think that's why you see so many stories coming out now, stories from people from their next generation, daughters or grandchildren of people who had gone through the Holocaust.
I've
And
had Leah Warshawski has been on the show for her documentary about her her grandmother, Big Sonia, which played on PBS. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. Yes, I've seen. There's so many, but I have seen that.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. I've had many on my show, as I said, so and I think more than ever, now more than ever, these stories are more important, I think.
it's interesting because many of the people who survived the Holocaust did not want to communicate their experience. They wanted to put it behind them, and they certainly didn't want to talk about it to their children because they wanted to spare their children the pain. But they were more easily able to speak about it to their grandchildren a generation later, uh, whom they felt they didn't have to protect as much as they had to protect their own children.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, and hope and it's nice that the grandchildren, many of them are preserving those stories
Yes.
in whatever way, whether it's through film or writing or whatever. And I think that's really important also. So, I mean, I could go on and on and on about your career. I mean, we talked a little bit. You've produced many films as well as been a filmmaker, and we talked about Peace by Chocolate, which I had the filmmaker on my show, Jonathan Kaiser, a couple of years ago.
Jonathan was a student of mine and a very talented student. Uh, Often, when the students graduated, I was able to help them often as an executive producer on their shows. Uh, they were, I it depended upon the film, my contribution. With Jonathan, I helped him on his initial script. Other people I help in the editing room, but often it's just I lend my name to their project as a way of helping them get financing. So it's a combination of things, but I'm always pleased to be able to help my students, especially because so many of them are talented. And the first film is very difficult to get off the ground. So anything I can do to help them, I'm happy to do.
And
And
that
then they go on to have their own careers.
and that's wonderful. We should mention that you are a professor at. You've been teaching for how many? 40 years? Is that right?
Yes, I recently retired from teaching at USC, but I taught there for 40 years, and I ran the documentary program. And Jonathan made a documentary in one of my classes. Many of the students who took the classes uh, went on to make documentaries. Jonathan did too, but several of them have also gone on to make fictional films. Uh, because making documentaries and making fictional films have more in common than their differences. It's really all about storytelling. Well, the main difference is that the documentaries, you don't have actors, you have real characters, you have real people. And in fictional films, you construct the characters and get actors to play them.
And that's why you're a good author. You translated that into becoming an author. Before we move on to Misfits, I do want to talk about Breaking Point, the war for documentary in the Ukraine. And you did this film in what, 2017?
It was actually finished in 2016. Yeah, and
2016.
I co-directed it with Ola Sanyan, who is a well-known Ukrainian director. And Olis came to me, and he said, "I want to tell the Ukrainian story to America, but I need some help in doing that because I don't know the American audience, and I don't part of the I want to include everything in the film, and I need some help in doing that. So we collaborated, and uh, I said to Olis, "You have to understand that probably most Americans don't even know where Ukraine exists. So we have to start from a point of view, complete ignorance, and try to trace both a historical and political background to the conflict. So the film was about the revolution on the Maidan, and then Russia's initial annexation of Crimea and the beginning of the incursion into the east, into the Donbass. Uh, so if Putin had seen the film, he would have realized uh, that it would not be easy to take over Ukraine, that Ukraine had a sense of nationalism that he quite underestimated.
Yeah, well, let's hope that conflict ends soon and that they're victorious in
Yes.
their independence.
So it was, I was really, I felt privileged to be able to make that film and help to tell the Ukrainian story to America. At the time it came out, it got great reviews, but really people were not interested at that moment.
Mm.
The political, international political crisis at that time was Syria. And Americans really can only deal with one international crisis at a time. But as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine again, then the film had a new life. And I'm happy it's still, you can still get it on Amazon. Breaking Point, the War for Democracy in Ukraine. I think there's the posters, which have to be hung on my wall in the background.
I would say I would think it would be more pertinent now than you're right than when it was released initially.
True.
So it's a
Yes.
good one to seek out, especially with everything's going on. You're right. And then we have the other conflict we have going on in Israel.
Right. Very.
So yeah, it, you're right. Americans can only deal with one at a time, but now we've got two hot spots.
And it's difficult. The world is really dealing with some critical issues that we haven't really confronted the way we need to.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Well, let's go into something more uplifting. Let's talk about Misfits, which I'm going to, for those who are watching on YouTube, here's the book, Misfits. And let's dive into this one. There were certain stories that it really resonated with me. Let's just go into the mink coat,
Oh, okay.
that story.
Right. Um, so the most of the stories take place in the book in Los Angeles, where I've lived for 50 years. But I also lived in Montreal at one point, and this story takes place in actually in Montreal and in Chicago. And it's a story about a young woman who gets a gift of a mink coat from her mother. And the mink coat is the through line through the story, and it has different meanings at different times in her life. Uh, and so I, I'm sorry about that. Uh, anyway, that's what the story is about. You like the story? What was it about the story that appealed to you?
Well, I remember when my mother, she always wanted a mink coat. And I remember when she got her first mink coat, which was a black llama, and how excited she was. And then later, and that was a shorter coat, and like knee length or whatever. And then she got a full length mink coat. And when she passed away, that's what I wanted. I did. I wanted her mink coats.
Did you get it?
Oh yes, oh yeah. My sister, she wanted more of the jewelry, and I wanted the mink coats, and so,
The,
so
the mink coat has various meanings to both the mother and to the daughter and to her husband and then her lover. So they all see the mink coat in a different way. So
yeah.
that's
It,
different.
it's a great story. I mean, now I live in Santa Barbara, California. I don't get to wear it very often, but usually around the holidays, I might be able to wear it to go somewhere, But there's you brought up, a lot of things about killing the the minks and whatnot too.
Yes,
So
story, and yes, that was my mother had a mink coat, which was so I'm sure that was part of the reason that I wrote the story.
I mean, that was back in the 40s and 50s. That was it was a big deal to have a mink coat in this, that era, fit 60s also, so women, that was a big, something very important to them, to
And
know.
Lauren Bacall was famous for, I think she advertised for Black Gamma and she wore a mink coat. Yeah, it was a symbol of elegance, certainly.
Right, right. And those are the Black Llama ads back in the 80s. They were, wonderful ads that they had put out with a lot of celebrities and whatnot. So,
But
but
now it's no
I
longer.
know I feel embarrassed when I wear it. So, I go like, oh, I gotta, I go, this is my mother's. It's this is old. Something from my mom. I feel like when I put it on that I'm having her arms around me. So it's got that symbolism, for me. So I enjoyed that story very much because I resonated with it a lot. Although you're right, it did have different meanings in the way that the story ends. It's very, interesting too. So the other one that really touched me a lot is Mute. And there's a deeper story to Mute. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about Mute and also how that story came into being?
Mute is a story about a father whose son is autistic, is diagnosed on the spectrum, who doesn't speak very much. And the father's trying to come to terms with his uh, difficulty in connecting with his son, and also with the image he had of what it means to be a father. Uh, One of the projects I had as a filmmaker was developing a website on autism. So I spent 5 years working with a team of people at USC, developing a video website to uh, sponsored by the Agency for Health Research and Quality in Washington to disseminate the best evidence-based treatments for autism. Well, that was our mandate. We started out, and then we expanded the website, which still exists. It's on YouTube now. It consists of 32 videos and a lot of interviews, and it's divided into three sections: understanding autism, living with autism, and treating autism. Uh, and so I met a lot of parents with autistic children. And when we finished the project, I still felt unfinished with the subject. Uh, I met and a lot of the stories that I've written are comes from the experiences I've had making films, unfinished experiences that I felt that still haunted me, and where I still felt unfinished. There's still aspects of it that I wanted to explore. And in this story, I really wanted to see it not from the child's perspective so much as the parent's perspective, and how a diagnosis of autism can break up families. And usually it's the father who leaves the family and the mother who ends up taking care of the child. But in this story, it's a reversal of that. And I wanted to explore that. And I mean, I write stories. A lot of the stories I write are to explore ideas that I find I can only get to the bottom of in writing.
Interesting. This one brought tears to my eyes. It really did. Did you, um, I don't want to give anything really away. I don't think I will be. If we talk about the monkey, was that something that when you were doing the series on autism, is that something that came up?
No, no, that's not something that came up, but people have gone to great lengths uh, to try to find a cure, or in their eyes. So part of the story is, rather than trying to find a magical cure, is to really confront the reality of who his son is.
Mhm.
And even though his son cannot speak, his son in many ways has qualities that if he would only that he comes to recognize and to come to accept. So the monkey is one manifestation of the lengths to which people will go to try to find a solution to a problem that is very challenging. And so, yes.
Yeah, it's very heartbreaking, and there's so many more children who have autism. I mean, that's what's also interesting. Yeah, did you discover that when you were doing?
Yes, there's a, people attribute to many things. Certainly, there's much more awareness now of the diagnosis. We're much more sensitive to it. But yes, there's a growing, I think, increase, not just here in this country, but around the world.
Yeah.
I've in I've been to China and taken the website to China. In fact, the website is translated into both Spanish and Mandarin.
Wow.
Uh, and so somebody in China saw it and said, and we found money for us to be able to subtitle in Mandarin because nothing like that exists in China. So it is a worldwide increase in autism, and why is there are a lot of different theories for it, but there's no definitive answer to why that is. Is it environmental? Certainly, environment may be one aspect of the increase.
Yes, well, I think a lot of the things that we do have, all the diseases and things we have, are about the environment that we live in, and I really think our diets, what we eat, how our food is processed, where we get our food from, how, all of those things. And I've done a lot of shows on those topics too.
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's no question about that. That all has an effect. It's difficult to measure, but I don't think there's any question in my mind, having doing it, that we do have an increase.
Yeah, definitely. Another story that I loved is A Drink with Opie.
Ah,
And again, how wonderful that you wrote about that. And then we had the Oppenheimer winning
yeah,
all of the, winning Best Picture and Best Director and all of those wonderful awards. I loved Oppenheimer.
right. Well, their film is quite good, but
Yes.
in my defense, I wrote that story before the movie came out. So
Well,
it was 7 years ago. It's about for people listening to this, it's about a scientist who encounters Oppenheimer in the bar of the La Fonda Hotel and thinks they have something in common and tries to use what they have in common to try to understand his own issues and also the the question, the fundamental question, how Oppenheimer could develop a bomb that caused so much destruction.
and it turns out, even though the conversation didn't go all that well necessarily, but they did have something deeply in common.
Yes, yes, and it's the story asks a question about the relationship between the personal and the political. But I was really, I think, drawn to the subject because of Oppenheimer's famous encounter with Truman after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And Oppenheimer said to Truman, Mr. President, we both have blood on our hands. And Truman afterwards said, don't bring that gloomy fellow around anymore.
It's a
We
great.
both, yes, we both had no known sin. So yes, nobody wants to hear that.
I know. Well, all of these stories are wonderful. One other one too is Damascus.
Uh, yeah.
You want to tell the audience a little bit what Damascus
Damascus
is?
is about a screenwriter who wins the lottery, someone who actually promoted the lottery, then wins the lottery and has to deal with the repercussions of that. Everyone believes that once you win the lottery, that your life is going to be happy ever after.
Yes.
And of course, the reality is almost all the stories you hear about lottery winners prove the opposite.
Hey, I think he was more miserable from the way you wrote it. He was more miserable until he had, a reason. I think, to be grateful for what he had, too. So, oh, Mark, these stories are all wonderful. They really are. I'm going to hold the book up again for those who are watching on YouTube. Misfits. It's just, they're quick reads. Wonderful to read right before you go to sleep at night, and you take us right in quickly. It's not like it takes a long time to get into the story, and there's twists and turns in each one that makes it fascinating. I just love the way you write and your films also. So are you working on anything coming up? Any
I'm
entries?
finishing up a film actually now for PBS about old age in America.
Oh, okay.
And we have it's the grain of America. We have increasingly older population, and we're not really prepared to deal with all the consequences of that. So
Right.
that's part of the film that I'm
Good.
working on.
Well, let's when that is finished, and let me know, and I'd love to have you back on the show.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been an honor having you on the show. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Okay,
it. Have
bye.
a great day. Bye bye.